Welcome to today's Lunch and Learn. Kent Ferris with the Social Action Office here in the Diocese of Davenport. We welcome those from our diocese and from other locations, those that are on the live event, as well as those that may pick it up later as a recording. The opening prayer comes to us by way of Catholic Relief Services. In the name of the Father, and of the Son, and of the Holy Spirit. Amen. God, our refuge, our ever-present help in trouble, your promises hold true. This we know, this we pray. For the widow, the refugee, the orphan, those who are too weak, too tired, too broken to cry out to you. When mountains shake, when leaders fail, when all seems absolutely, irretrievably, impossibly lost, you enter. We thank you for your presence. We pray we receive your deliverance. Your eyes are on the righteous, your ears attentive to their cry. You are close to the brokenhearted. You save those crushed in spirit. You rescue your servants. And still, lest we forget all those who, suffering today, will still be in this moment a week, a month, a year from now, remind us to pray for the widow, the refugee, the orphan, that your promises still hold true. You are still our help in trouble, ever present, our refuge, our God. Amen. In the name of the Father, Son, and the Holy Spirit. Amen. The Farm Bill and Supplemental Nutrition Support is the topic of today's Lunch and Learn. The Farm Bill, one of the most significant pieces of legislation that Congress must deal with, consists of 12 titles or sections. Title 4, Nutrition, includes SNAP, which is formerly known as food stamps, which is the preeminent supplemental food program in the U.S., predominantly reaching millions of children, elderly, and disabled persons. To understand where the Farm Bill and SNAP fit into our national budget, we have with us in-house researcher Glenn Leach, and he is going to assist us in looking at that part of the bill that deals with those types of assistance as part of the total national budget before zeroing in on Title IV. And with that, I turn the microphone over to Mr. Glenn Leach.
And I'm going to share my screen so you can see what I'm talking about, hopefully. Does my screen show?
Yes.
Okay. Well, this slide is a little bit of a misnomer because it was the place I started when I was asked by St. John Vianney to make a presentation on the Farm Bill. And shortly after that, they came back and said, oh, not the whole thing, just the food and nutrition portion, at which I heaved a great sigh of relief because the Farm Bill, as Kent said, is a big package. The 2008 Farm Bill that we are in the process of reauthorizing was 530 pages, which is a great example of why the Congress does its business in committees and values the staff that develops expertise within to support the committees. The Farm Bill itself goes back to 1933, where it was the Federal Surplus Relief Act that was in part a way of dispensing with some of the excess production that we had as a great agricultural organization. All right, let's see how I can change the slides now here. I have a problem.
You're showing us a different slide now. So if you've
Okay.
actually switched. Yep.
There we go. Yeah, now we're in business. Okay. I say the U.S. budget. We should say our budget because budgets are a moral statement. Every budget tells where your heart, where your interest, where your everything lies. The U.S. budget has three major components: interest on the debt, which is a mandatory expenditure, and mandatory and discretionary expenditures. The Farm Bill is hidden as a part of the discretionary section over here in food and agriculture. The mandatory portion is largely dominated by Social Security, Medicare, and Medicaid. And as it says, the payments from those programs are set by formulas, not dollar amounts. So the Congress would have to go into the enabling legislation to change the formulas, to change the amount of money in each of those. But the Congress has limited interest in messing with Social Security or Medicare or Medicaid. Just to illustrate, the Medicare, Social Security, and Medicaid are 65% of this mandatory budget. All the rest of this stuff coming from the discretionary over to here, you can see all of the different things that we have. Those are the things that Congress gets to argue about, unless they have the courage to change Medicare and so forth. Now, I've said that the budget is divided into both discretionary and mandatory, but it's a little bit more complicated than that, as we'll see. But if you take the discretionary budget, and you notice that the military is almost half of that budget, and you place it on the discretionary, you can see that there's very little really left for the Congress to argue about each year, unless, again, they get into the Social Security, Medicare, and Medicaid. Therefore, and this is kind of an aside, but if the Congress really wants to make changes in the programs that spend the most money and therefore result in the most deficit year to year, they have to get into those mandatory programs. You notice again that the military takes over half of the, or nearly half of the discretionary budget. Going on now to the Farm Bill, as Kent said, it consists of 12 titles, and all of them are of significance to Iowa as an agricultural state. Our economy is approximately 35% agricultural at this time. But we're only going to talk about the nutrition portion, Title IV. Now, I said there's a blurry line that separates the mandatory from the discretionary. This is a listing of all of the major nutrition programs that were in the 2018 Farm Bill and are going to be a part of what we're trying to reauthorize in the new Farm Bill, which apparently will become the 2024 Farm Bill. Hopefully not the 2025. Although there is already great controversy about some of the provisions. Basically, as you see here, each of these food programs, including SNAP, has separate authorizing acts that put it into the law books, but the amounts are discretionary. In other words, the fact that there must be a SNAP is under the Food and Nutrition Act of 2008, but how much money and who gets it is discretionary. Now, don't ask me why, but the way the government organizes things, WIC is not on this chart. It's similar, however, to all of these other programs. But all of them are, but WIC is separately, or because, excuse me, tripping on my words today, because these programs are separately authorized, they are mandatory. And once the Congress gets through dealing with them in the Farm Bill, they are included, the expenses are included in the mandatory portion of the budget. Now, if you would like me to explain the reason for that, please, I'd really rather not try. But if you look at the Farm Bill itself, and again, going way back, the Farm Bill is buried in Food and Agriculture. The Farm Bill itself, these are the various components. This is all 12 titles. And you notice how they're broken out. Don't pay attention to the specific dollars because these go back to 2021 in this instance. But you can see that nutrition programs, of which SNAP is 95%, dominate the whole of Title IV and dominates dominates the entire Farm Bill. This is it right here, the Farm Bill. And you can see that the nutrition programs are pretty much all of it. There's been some arguments in the past, or you will often hear many of the congressmen say that one of the problems with the assistance programs, the social safety net, is that the social safety net has become a hammock. It's grown out of hand and it's just dominating things. Well, no, not quite. This chart, which comes from the USDA, shows that SNAP, Child Nutrition, WIC, and others. WIC is managed by the USDA along with the others, but why it wasn't in that chart, again, don't ask me. That's congressional logic, not mine. But for the 8 years between 11 and 2019, the expenditures were relatively flat, and in the case of SNAP, declining. It was only with the pandemic and the people going out of work and losing income that these benefits began to climb. Looking at it on this chart, which is specific to SNAP, and this chart comes from the Congressional Budget Office, tracks pretty well with the one from the USDA, but it shows that the expenditure for SNAP, and I might add here that this black portion is what the USDA spends on administering the program. And of course, it's a part of the total. But the expenditures for SNAP follow the economy, follow employment, follow the income of, in this case, 40 million Americans, going back to 2021 that the chart comes from. So the argument that we have a hammock here really doesn't hold water. Now, SNAP is a state-administered federal program. So the state of Iowa gets to put its stamp on the eligibility. It has to, any rulings passed by the state of Iowa have to be approved by the USDA, but Iowa gets the opportunity to make those changes. This is the current through September 24 of the maximum income that you can have and still qualify for SNAP. You can see that you have to be pretty poor in order to qualify for SNAP. Now, the difference between the gross monthly income and the net income is that you are allowed to subtract from your gross monthly income factors such as these. And again, these come from the state of Iowa website. You get to deduct these from your gross income in much the same way that we do taxes. And in fact, I don't know who did it specifically, but it would seem like a tax accountant designed the program. It's fortunately for users of SNAP, on the website, there are calculators that'll simplify the process of finding out whether or not you qualify. But one of the things that the state of Iowa has done is to modify those qualifications. And we'll talk about that in just a minute. Prior to, well, this is for 2020, prior to present day restrictions, this is what the breakout of the benefits to Iowans were. And you can see these are not large amounts of money. They are certainly not the amounts of money that would lead you to say, well, I don't have to work. I'm going to live off of SNAP or some other benefits. And again, SNAP is just for food. And here's where we get into the way that SNAP reaches people, or what people are reached by SNAP. 24% of it is folks, if my income were a bit lower, would be me, elderly. 66% goes to families with children. Only 10% of the SNAP, and this again was based on 2020 figures, but the relative proportions don't change with the time. Over time, these relative proportions have held pretty much true. If you'd like to really dig into it, you can go to this URL and find some details. The Congressional Budget Office and the USDA teamed up to do an in-depth analysis of where SNAP was going. And this is it. They have the state has an acronym for this 10% of SNAP, and it is the Adults Without Dependents, AWDA. This is the way it's referred to in both the state legislative notes and in the federal government legislative notes. And this is the group that is being focused on in the discussions of eligibility as far as income level and hours of work and similar situations. Iowa, as many of you already know, has changed the eligibility in the sense that they have restricted the number of things that can be subtracted from your income. And they've done this by saying that if you, for example, have two vehicles and the second one has a value of more than $10,000, then it doesn't count. You can't subtract that, or that becomes part of your assets. And this is where they want to apply work requirements also. You must work for X hours per week or month in order to qualify for your benefits. The irony of this is that this is the logo that appears on the Iowa website for SNAP. Now, basically, that's all that I had. Uh, I'd like to answer any questions that I can.
What's the, if I can ask one to begin, Glenn, what is the present status of the Farm Bill, timeframes for passage or anticipated milestones as it proceeds as a bill?
Well, as you know, all funding bills have to originate in the House, and the House has had some difficulty recently selecting leadership and so forth. But the present leadership uh, passed a bill that was accepted by the Senate and signed by the president that pushed everything off to 2024. And the Farm Bill, they did so in two breaks. One group of legislation has to be addressed by the end of February. The other has to be addressed by the end of April. The Farm Bill is in the portion that it has to be addressed by April. The notes of the House Agriculture Subcommittee prior to the current leadership change with Mr. Johnson indicated that the House saw a need to reduce SNAP by about 30%.
We have folks that are with us in parishes that are part of programs that food or meals are provided for those that are living and working in poverty. And so a question could be, with those types of proposed changes, what might that mean for them in their parish, in their community, if a proposed 30% change is enacted, Glenn?
Well, this is going to be a very big deal for any families that are presently enrolled in SNAP, because as you know, SNAP only pays for food items. It doesn't pay for any of your household items that are normally bought at a grocery store, such as personal toiletries, even detergents and toilet paper. Um, so these people are going to be a continuation of what we have already seen from the pandemic, and that is the food banks and their subsidiary food pantries are going to be hit hard. And unfortunately, the story that we hear from the food banks, including our local one, is that due to the economy, they're not seeing the kinds of corporate contributions that they had seen in the past, where food manufacturers or packagers would send them whole truckloads of beans or rice or what have you. Those are not coming with the same frequency that they were before, making the food pantries even more and more dependent on individual gift donations.
Glenn, are non-citizens able to participate in SNAP?
No, unfortunately, like most federal programs, they are available only to people with Social Security numbers. Now, all of these programs are nutrition programs, but I'm guessing that and I'm guessing here, that all of these, and including these include, by the way, the food, the schools where we have the free or reduced rate lunches and breakfast. Those have been funded across the years at a pretty uniform level. So whether it's because the total amount is insignificant, and when I say insignificant, it depends on whether you're someone who's hungry or whether you're a legislator. Whether it's the small dollars associated with those other programs or not, I'm not sure, but they have been funded at relatively the same level for about the last 10 years. Now, when I say insignificant, the reason that I use pie charts, for example, is because I can't wrap my head around numbers like this. This is billions of dollars. That's so far above the biggest thing in my budget, which is called a mortgage, that I can't even wrap my head around it. So when I am talking to congressional sources, I like to ask, what percentage of the budget is that, rather than dollars? Dollars are scary. A congressman will say, we have spent X amount of money on, and since that X includes many millions of dollars, it sounds very large. But obviously, it's only a percentage of the whole.
Hey, Glenn, Steve Barton, thanks much for this information. I know we saw it at St. John Vianney, but it's good to see it again, and you got some additional information in here. But to go back to Kent's question, the impact on people that you come in contact with or serve, if there's a 30% across the board cut in SNAP, won't it affect mostly, well, 90% of the impact will be on children and seniors, since that's 90% of the beneficiaries of SNAP?
Oh, yes, definitely. Only 10% is the working age adults.
Can you respond to any changes that are taking place to the WIC program?
I have not studied the WIC program, and if there are changes being made there, I'm not up to speed on them.
It's such an excellent program that people need to be referred to that program for the kids and pregnant moms.
Yeah.
I should add that the state of Iowa has received an increase in as a result of the USDA reevaluating what it considers to be a basic food plate. They shifted to a larger dollar value for that food plate in recognition of the fact that real food costs more money than junk food. And so they have increased the amount of money, the USDA has increased the amount of money that will be going to each state. The amount, however, and again, it's in millions of dollars on a national level, but it amounts to $61 a month per family on the average.
So
Glenn,
Glenn,
are you going to be able to make this PowerPoint available to us?
Yeah, no
Great.
problem with that.
I have a question for you, Glenn. This is Tom Strevler. So the federal funds go to the state, and then the state decides how they're distributed?
Yes, basically. They have to follow the basic federal guidelines, but they are free to, as in the case of Iowa, make more stringent requirements if they think that that is necessary. And the changes that Iowa has made are so significant in terms of figuring out whether you qualify or don't qualify, because they have established a requirement for a search of over 20 national databases to determine if you are receiving funds from different places that you haven't included in your income. Their income verification is very big in the most recent state legislation. And it is so big that the enabling legislation that passed, that the governor signed off on, includes funding for a company to be hired to do these evaluations.
Jane has a question, Glenn.
Yes. I mentioned at that meeting at St. John Vianney about the Iowa Hunger Coalition. Sorry. And I just received a notice for another virtual meeting. I registered, but I have a conflict, but I'll get a recording. But last week, I saw an article in the newspaper about states requiring, making a law, passing a law that larger institutions with excess food be required to donate it to food banks, and as many as possible to send non-edible food to composting rather than landfills. So several states have done this, and they said that it made a tremendous difference in how much food was available at food banks. So then I sent this article to the chairperson of our food rescue program, and she forwarded on to Iowa Hunger Coalition, asked if they would be interested in pursuing this as well. So I hope it does, and I'll be pushing for that as like one aspect of fulfilling some of the needs. I'm sure it won't come up to what we want in the SNAP program, but it would be something to help.
Definitely would help, because there are estimates by a number of organizations that as much of as 40% of the food produced in the United States is wasted.
Correct.
And doesn't even end up in a compost pit, which might ultimately be used as fertilizer for more food, but rather goes into the landfill.
Also causing more climate heating.
Yes.
Okay, well, that's what I had to say.
Jane's comment is a helpful one in that as we hear from Glenn on the SNAP program in this moment, it also reminds me of the importance of people in local parishes, keeping eyes and ears open, different coalitions that are at play within our state that provide background information and support to be able to give the most realistic picture of what it means to face the economic challenges that we're talking about. And so Glenn and his work on our team is not only looking at federal pieces of legislation, but also the different networks, depending on the issue, that have information and resources. We will find ourselves talking with Bread for the Poor and Catholic Relief Services, other entities at a national level, but it's also good to know neighbors within the state and our communities for whom this is a particular issue and being able to draw the information that they provide as well. So thank you, Jane, for that comment.
Just to add a little perspective to what we're talking about, I had a woman at McAnthony Window this week that's in a class I'm teaching that shared with us that several years ago she was in a situation where she had no food for her family. And so she went to Walmart and she got a jar of peanut butter and a loaf of bread. And she went to the manager and said, "I have no money to pay for this. Would you give it to me because I have no food?" And the manager said no. And so then she looped back and she decided to steal the peanut butter and the loaf of bread. And she was caught and arrested. And she since still struggles, but has somewhat gotten onto her feet. But she said that she has hoarded 50 containers of peanut butter in her cabinet in her apartment because she never wants to experience that again, or her family to experience that again. It's real. The stuff that we're talking about, what I'm trying to say is this is real.
Right.
Yeah.
There is no question about that.
Yeah, I was last night at Iowa City at the meeting for Center for Worker Justice, and there was a banker that was there, and he was talking about the issue that's happening now where people are trying to get loans because of high credit card debt that they have accumulated because they haven't been able to afford the groceries and their rent and things like that, and they put them on credit cards, and now they're trying to get loans and they don't qualify, and that this situation is getting really bigger all the time out there. I know Center for Worker Justice is going to work up some trainings on budgeting and finance, but it's getting to be a very serious problem for many people in this country. And WIC is one thing I'm really concerned about because our infant mortality rate is going the wrong direction in this country. And WIC program helps women be healthy while they're carrying their babies and after their babies are born.
I would add that we've got a pretty good cross-section of folks from different parts of the diocese on this call. And our responsibility in support of a bishop's office is to know what's going on and what the experience is. And we try really hard to stay in contact with the John Coopers of the diocese who can give you a real-time report on the number of people seen and the amount of food that's distributed. If you find yourself in your community with bare shelves at your food pantry, talk with your pastor and give us an email or a call. There have been instances where we were made aware of such matters, and then we try to figure out what the diocese can do from here based on you all knowing best what's happening locally. But when you hit those points, we also have a responsibility to let elected officials know what's happening real time in their communities and amongst their constituents. And leaving them and giving them those types of updates can happen year round, even if they don't happen to be in a particular legislative session, because they have a responsibility to their constituents, and to be able to hear what is happening is part of their work responsibilities. Getting a note on the 2022 Iowa statewide material characterization study indicates that 21.6% of the materials placed in Iowa's landfills are organics. 14.6% is loose food waste, and 4.6 is packaged food waste. We are sometimes characterized as consumers. If we can figure out how to be better consumers and more judicious about going about it, while also being ever mindful of those for whom consumption is a genuine concern. I would also add as a plug that we draw attention to those that are experiencing food insecurity with the Lenten collection rice bowl, 25% of which stays in the diocese, and we use those funds to help local communities with food assistance and food support, hunger fighting. But that type of awareness is again, it's a year-round thing. It's not merely a Lenten observance.
And could somebody speak about the, I think someone said earlier something about a food rescue program, but you know, if so much food is being wasted, wouldn't a less political and more natural solution would be to make better use of the food that we have, so that people, you know, because it would change the funding formula, because you wouldn't require that. The food banks could distribute. It just seems like, I'm sure there are major obstacles to it, but I just am not that familiar with it.
Tom, I have read that there are, again, in the same statistics that talk about the amount of food that ends up in the landfill, I have read that the average family wastes 35% of its food. So there's plenty of room even for us as individuals to make an improvement, because all food that is wasted cuts into the availability of foods and drives up the prices of foods. And there are a number of different organizations that have become engaged with rescuing food, either from restaurants or from stores that would not normally contribute food to food banks. And Barb just posted a note that the messenger will shortly be
This
talking
week's
about this week's news. Catholic Messenger will address food waste.
Good.
For those of you that are familiar with the show MASH, and Colonel Blake and Radar would just show up and he had handed it to you. That is for us what the Catholic Messenger is, the timeliness and the way that they cover articles, and in this case an editorial talking about this particular topic is always timely. Thank you, Barb, and your team.
Yeah, I should say that Barb's husband, Steve, has now started rescuing food for us from the Fairway in LeClaire. We really appreciate that, Barb.
I'd like to make another comment about food rescue. There are a couple of organizations that I'm aware of. One is called Quad City Food Rescue Partnership, where we do help organizations with large amounts of food to donate. So the main obstacle there is getting transporters to get the food from the donator to the people who say that they'll receive it. So if anyone can volunteer for that, that would be, I would suggest getting in touch with both our local Quad City Food Rescue Partnership, as well as Food Rescue US. They work with a app, and you sign up for when you're available, and they let you know what is available to be rescued and delivered. So those are two food rescue things that need help and that can be expanded upon.
Excellent, thank you.
Thank you, thank you.
A
I'd
brief,
go back to Glenn's previous point about the more stringent requirements in the state of Iowa for SNAP, and add to it that those same more restrictive requirements, states also applying to housing assistance. So people in need are getting like a double, triple whammy on assistance from those more stringent requirements.
And again, this is based on the same sort of misunderstanding on the part of the public that affects foreign aid. If you ask the man on the street what percentage of the U.S. budget goes to foreign aid, the guess will be from 10 to 20%, when actually it's less than 1%. Again, when legislators or others talk in terms of dollars, it sounds like a tremendous amount, but in terms of the percentage of the budget, it's minuscule, making it doubly unfair to try to recoup the excesses from the poor.
there's always a what, now what, a what, so what, and now what that people will take away from getting information, Glenn. So what is the now what takeaway for those that hear this? What is it within their means to do?
It is within everyone's means to do as Jane and many others have done, and that is to constantly contact your legislators. Write letters to the editor. Try to educate the public as well as your legislators.
As you may have noticed, Lunch and Learn has returned after a bit of a hiatus. In the past, you would also get a promotional note as to the one that's coming in the future. You're going to have to wait. You're going to have to wait to hear what the next one is. But we do have a commitment for 2024 to reintroduce the newsletter, as well as to have Lunch and Learn offerings more regularly. We've got folks that are assisting us in ways that will help us come back together to continue to provide information. 2024 will be there will be many there will be many things that happen in 2024 that will test our resolve at the common good and care for our neighbor. And our hope is that we can use the newsletter and Lunch and Learns to provide information on particular issues through the lens of our faith, our Catholic faith, to be able to inform individuals and to hear from people across our 22 counties in order to figure out what is ours to do and call us to do so.
And I was wondering why we had so many people on here with us, if there was anyone that had particular topics they would like to hear about.
Sure.
Well, I think a topic we brought up at our Peace and Justice meeting a while ago dealt with the doctrine of discovery, which really affects the white supremacy attitude of our country, and to this day, not 400 500 years ago, but the group thought, well, who would be an expertise on this? Well, we didn't, we're still exploring the concept, but it's an issue that seems to have grown out of the several papal bulls back in the 1400s, even before and then after Columbus, which allowed the Christian religions to just take property that was occupied by people who were not Christian. And it's a concept that really is the founding attitude toward white supremacy and colonialism. It'd be wonderful if somebody knew somebody who was somewhat versed in that concept.
To your point, Tom, St. Anthony's has a book study, and amongst the large number of books that they've read and discussed, there has been one that was on Christian nationalism, white supremacy, and Loxie. I'm getting the affirmation from Loxie out of the corner of my eye to say that that's the case. Now, what that means is that that book study looked at what, in the same way that Loxie floated it by, it was a matter of like a discussion, and they decided to go to that. So the person that leads that book study, who's part of our technical team of sorts that helps our office, may be the first person to engage. But it's also possible, based on the way you just teed it up, Tom, that it may be a matter of seeing if there's not also an Ambrose theologian that could do part one, and then the other one could be part two, as to look at a more contemporary book read based on that particular topic. I got my team is taking notes, and that's
the papal bull that Tom refers to way back in the papacy of Alexander the Sixth is indeed the document that Tom speaks of, that said if you discover a land where the occupants are not Christian, it's yours.
And you can enslave the people.
Yes.
Yeah. It's
that's actually
shocking,
a lot
but
of
it's
people
still
have
alive.
said that that's the foundation for racism also.
so Tom, your suggestion is to pick a relatively light and simple concept to discuss. And
Yeah, something that something we can feel good about.
something
It's mind numbing. I'm glad that Glenn is familiar with it. Unfortunately, because of the way we educate ourselves in this country, the United Nations addressed this issue, and there were, out of the 140 some countries that decided to repeal that or deny that or reject that concept, only 4 stuck with it, of which we are one. Also Canada, Australia, and New Zealand. Still, now Obama overturned that. We refused to sign the document that said we don't believe in this kind of thing anymore. But yeah, it's still alive here. I mean, Ruth Bader Ginsburg used it as justification for a Supreme Court case that she decided when she was still alive. So it's not like this thing's gone away.
we may be doubling back with you, Tom, because though you asked for somebody to speak on it, you've also done some thought and probably reading of your own. So if you get brought in, then that'll be okay, because you posed it.
Glad to help. Yeah.
Hey, Kent.
Yes, Amy.
I always thought it was helpful to check in with community action organizations in that cover our various counties.
Yes.
They seem to be very aware of what are the major concerns in their counties, and then also what are some of the solutions that are available. And I think it's helpful just to see what similarities, what differences there might be.
Yeah.
Right.
Yes.
The community action agencies would be very good for catching the pulse of the county.
Something on infant mortality that came up here. We were talking about it a little while ago. I think would be good.
Well, it's not just, to me, John, it's not just infant mortality. The U.S. has the 50th worst rate in the world for infant mortality, and its rate for maternal mortality is not far behind. And a recent issue, the November issue of the Catholic Health Association newspaper that's put out by the Catholic Health Services, is a discussion of the lack of equity in healthcare within the United States, and the finding of a recent report that says that communities of color in the United States are dying more from all causes, the infant mortality, the maternal death rate, and cancer and heart failure and so forth. They're dying at a higher rate than the white population, not because they are more susceptible to these diseases, but because of inequities in care.
One big topic, speaking of mortality rates, it would be good to cover is gun violence. Top cause of death for children now, as I understand.
It's the leading cause of death for children under 18.
The conversation about infant mortality, and Glenn and I were talking about this between meetings within the past week. The United States Conference of Catholic Bishops has a campaign called Walking with Moms in Need. And to have that particular element that Glenn is referencing, where communities of color are more adversely affected, I think that would be, it would indeed be a worthy topic, as is gun violence. Absolutely. We are 3 minutes away from the top of the hour. Again, my apologies for not being able to share with you the next one. I do thank everybody for being with us over this noon hour. It's still Advent, so I will say I wish you the remainder of a blessed Advent season and those that are the seasons that are to follow. At any time you have questions from your place, from your religious order, from your parish, within your community, if you ever have comments or questions, please do not hesitate to call us. I will give one shout out to the good people in Albia. Their request that they weren't getting the newsletter is what prompted me to get off of my backside and commit us to 2024 and getting it back started again. So the feedback that we get is invaluable, as well as the eyes and ears you have in your individual communities. And then lastly, I want to make sure to give special thanks to Glenn Leach, who continues to work. He's still under contract. So others have tried to buy him away, but he's still on the team. Glenn, you're announcing something?
One quick shout out to Steve Barton and those at St. John Vianney who asked me to make this sort of a presentation because I learned so much in trying to find a credible way of presenting it to others. I made the last changes to this just 30 minutes before we went.
Well, we learned a lot too, Glenn, and everybody here today. Thank you very much again, and thanks, Kent.
Thank you, Ken.
Take care.
God bless.
Bye.